Hello, bonsoir, and welcome to the Get French Football News Show. I'm Nathan Staples, and joining me this evening are Jeremy Smith and Peter Rutzler. No one is doing big bouts like Ligue 1 this season, and yet again, another huge game brought out the best in both teams. But who else broke records? I don't think L'Equipe mentioned it, and who simply broke down? All that and more after your latest headlines. Dijon returned to winning ways on Friday night as they beat Rennes 2-1 in a solid performance. 38-year-old Florent Baumont scored his first for 3 years and his first for the club before Julio Tavares netted in the second half to cancel out Ismaili Sarr's equaliser. Paris Saint-Germain returned to winning ways and got some kind of revenge on Montpellier in a 4-0 victory, having been held goalless by Michel de Zakarian's men in the reverse fixture. A Neymar double and Edison Cavani's record-breaking strike were enough for the leaders. In the multiplex, Metz pulled off another victory as they beat Nice 2-1 thanks to a Nolan Roux double, and managerless Toulouse stole a 1-0 win from 10-man Troyes. Paul-Georges Ntep scored his first Saint-Etienne goal and his first goal in Ligue 1 for over a year in their 2-1 win against Caen. Nantes won 3-0 away to Guingamp to separate themselves from the pack in fifth, and Angers won their third home game in a row with a 1-0 victory over Amiens. On Sunday, Lille continued their recovery under Christophe Galtier as they saw off Strasbourg 1-0. 2-1, I should say. While Gus Poyet began his new era at Bordeaux. It couldn't have started much better, really, as the home side dispatched of Lyon in a strong 3-1 victory. In the final match of the weekend, Marseille and Monaco played out another top four cracker. Keita Balde gave the visitors an early lead, but Adil Rami hit straight back. And after half-time, former Monegasque striker Valère Germain put l'OM in front, only for Fabinho to steal a point from the Stade Velodrome. And that's all for now. But for all your latest news in the world of French football, head on over to our website at www.getfootballnewsfrench.com and follow us on Twitter at GFFN. We start this week with that game on Sunday night between Marseille and Monaco, who played out a real barnstormer. Neither could quite seize upon Lyon's misfortune from early in the day, which we'll talk about a little later. But these big games keep delivering, don't they, Peter?
Yeah, they do. I mean, we've had a treat every Sunday night, it seems, for the big games. Obviously, it was Lyon PSG last week. Obviously, the 6-1 before in the reverse fixture. And the Classique also had the drama, didn't it, with the Neymar red card and Cavani's late goal. And once again, we were given a treat for the eyes without trying to roll out too many cliches. But, you know, it's a good thing for Liga. I mean, especially in terms of marketing and how we've talked about how it's been ridiculed. You know, we had Farmers League with the Neymar arrival at Guingamp, and then when he played at Guingamp. And, you know, it just bucks the trend a little bit, in that it's been consistently able to show that when the big clubs meet, you're getting a good showing, you're getting a spectacle, but also high quality performances, high quality matches. And last night we saw bits of that. A great game as well. But a point that I think both may take, but I mean, in terms of the turnaround from when they first met back in August, I don't think anyone would have expected that Marseille would now be above Monaco in the league table. And I think, you know, that's testament to Garcia's to his work and going back to basics really with Marseille. And the two sides put on a good spectacle last night, and it's really good for the league as well.
Yeah, it always is, and it's great to see these teams locking horns and really going at it. It seems, and we'll start really with Marseille. Really, we've questioned at times their form against the top sides in Ligue 1 in previous seasons. They had a good game against Paris Saint-Germain earlier this season, but the games against Lyon, the games against Marseille, they didn't quite live up to the standard that we hoped they might be able to get to. Now they're starting to grow. Are Marseille, Jez, starting to show that they can hang with the big teams in these kind of big games?
They're getting there. I mean, I've been quite critical of them during the season, but I do think that they've been steadily improving during the season, both against the poor teams and the better teams. I think they're sort of up there in the top 3 or 4, because they're sort of weirdly getting a lot more consistent good results against the other teams, whereas Lyon and Monaco are somehow still dropping points here and there. And yeah, against the other members of the top 3, it hasn't been so good. But I think this was, I mean, it might be harsh, but I discount PSG a tiny bit because that really is such a sort of derby, such a grudge match that it is one of those ones where form goes out of the window to an extent. In the other matches, obviously the first one against Monaco where they got smashed, and against Lyon when they lost 2-0, and I don't think Lyon really needed to go out of second or third gear in that match. I thought Marseille were really unimpressive. So I think the whole season has been a sort of gradual improvement, and yeah, I thought yesterday was probably the best of the matches they played against the top 3 as well. I think probably a draw was a fair result. I'm not sure either team necessarily deserved to lose, but it definitely shows that Marseille are on the right track, albeit Monaco are sort of having a disappointing season. I still kind of think in a way that their league position flatters them quite a lot as well.
Yeah, it's one of those strange seasons, isn't it? Really, in League One, there's quite a bunch in the middle of the table that at least these bigger teams are taking advantage of it right now. But someone who has impressed throughout this season, and some people are even labelling as the man that's carried Marseille at times this season, really, Peter, is Florian Thauvin. He had another good evening, really, tormenting that right-hand side with Dirubio Subdibe, his opponent. It was maybe a little bit too easy for him at times, but he really pulls the strings for them at the moment, and they sort of play to his whim. It's getting less reliant on him, but he is really still their main man.
He very much so, and I think the argument about him carrying the team, it does have a lot of validity. He does seem to take them to another level, and his performances have been outstanding. I think against Sidibe last night, I mean, Sidibe's not a left back, and I think it showed. And I think it was a bit, but not naive, but it was definitely a gamble from Jardim to try that. I mean, they had better options at their disposal, but Thauvin showed his quality, and he caused him real issues. He did turn him inside out on regular occasions. There was that flick over his head, and it's great to see. I mean, we've talked about Thauvin all season about how well he's done, and we've mentioned how when he went to the Premier League it was too early, and now we're looking at definitely a more mature performer, someone who is able to change games on his own. He's not inconsistent. He's turning up every single week, and the contrast you have with Thauvin and Dimitri Payet is quite profound. It has been since Payet's returned anyway, and I think we saw a bit of that last night. I don't think Payet turned up against Strasbourg last week. I thought he did well, and obviously he captured the world's attention again with that step over the injured Akija, the Strasbourg keeper. But we haven't seen anything like the Payet that we knew from Euro 2016. But and it's Thauvin's the man who has carried the flame for OM. So I think when we're looking ahead to the World Cup, especially, those two will definitely be vying for potentially the same spot. I think Deschamps looks at Thauvin and Payet, and he looks at the options he gives them. Payet can go on the left, he can go in the centre. Thauvin can go on the right, and the centre can go on the left as well. And I think that versatility, of course, is key to Deschamps. And I think he'll look at the two of them as one or the other. And Thauvin is by far and away the more effective player. And now he's attracting interest again from big clubs, which is really good to see. And his return has done him well. And it'd be nice to see. I was talking about it earlier in the week with on Twitter about Michy Batshuayi. If Marseille had been able to bring him back, and you can see the turnaround that Thauvin's had. And not that Batshuayi's out of form, but just a chance to play consistently. And you're looking at a real recovery. But he's done very, very well this season, and last night again we saw that, and he's turning up in the big games.
So to me, Tauvin's kind of exactly the sort of the player who represents Marseille at the moment. Like, I think for a lot of the season he's been playing very well against the lesser teams and gone completely missing against the big teams. But again, yesterday I thought it was, of the matches against the top teams, it was his best performance. For me, it's still Gustavo who sort of really makes Marseille tick, and I think that their better performances are usually the ones where Sanson plays well, and in the last sort of month or two, it's been great to see Germain hitting form as well. But yeah, Tauvin's like clearly the main sort of attacking man now, and yeah, I completely agree that Payet, to me, he's a bit of a busted flush, and I thought it was a strange. Re-signing him made sense, but for that amount of money, I thought it was a very strange decision, and I'm not sure that I don't think his performances overall since he came back have justified the fee at all.
I think it was Rich who mentioned it before about that core of Marseille, that you've got Mandanda, Gustavo, as you mentioned, and Thauvin and Sanson, you can probably include in that as well, that seem to have carried the team. And it's now, and Garcia over this long period where they've gone, I think it's 1 loss in 18, I think now, it's sort of just been building around that. And there's still some work to be done. And, as we were saying about Payet, he's been underwhelming. Campos as well, very much a hit and miss sort of player. And he's finding different bits. Like Germain, of course, has come in and now really looks the part, and is actually, I think, benefiting Thauvin, and especially with the attacking options they have. Better than Mitroglou anyway.
Well, that's the thing. When we saw Germain come to them in the summer, we thought that's an excellent move for him. That's the right kind of move for him at where he is. He's starting to, wasn't getting the game time at Monaco. He maybe might have done had they known that Kylian Mbappe was definitely going to leave in the summer. He might have even been a starting berth, but giving him that chance at Marseille now he's got more players around him. That was probably the problem at the start. He was a little bit too isolated. He succeeded at Nice with having Ben Arfa nice and close to him and linking with him and adding to that attacking threat, really. And Payet, he still feels like that statement signing, really, doesn't it? It was the name that mattered more than anything else. That was the name to put them back on the map in terms of the spending power that they have, and the fact they wanted to be a recognisable name on the world front again. But he had a really awful game last night, especially in the first half. He was just sour. He was moaning at every decision. He had 3 or 4 fouls where the referee had to be reminded how many fouls he'd given to be able to give him a booking. But he was just tepid, it seems. It's a real shame that he's just never really hit the heights again. Since that sort of stumble at West Ham as his head was turned, he's never really recovered. But talking about Monaco, obviously, and they had a part to play in this game quite nicely, at least anyway. They have a couple of issues still throwing around them, really, Jez. They're still trying to find the right mix. They went with a 4-2-3-1 in this one with João Moutinho for the forward. Lemar supposedly has a leg injury. That's why he's out. He's also out on Wednesday, but take that maybe with a grain of salt if rumours start to build up, but we'll wait and see. Are they still trying to fit in the likes of Keita Balde, Yuri Tillemans? They still feel like they're a little bit disjointed at this moment, similar to maybe what we saw with this Monaco side 2 years ago, where they were still finding their rhythm and finding their place in Liga.
Yeah, I think that is proving sort of time and again what a good manager he is. That he's somehow managing to hang in there in the top 4, considering that it hasn't yet clicked with the players. And yeah, I don't think it's any coincidence that only summer, where they didn't really sell too many and kept the core of the team together, the following year he won Liga. This one's going to recover quickly from the sale of the caliber of players that they sold last summer. So in a sense, I think he's still doing well to be up there. At the same time, I mean, it is now nearly February, and it does feel a little bit like he's sort of still trying to work out what his best team is. Lemar actually is probably one of the reasons why that hasn't been straightforward, because he sort of started the season in blistering form, lost a bit of form, has had a couple of injuries, so had a bit of a stop-start return. And yeah, some of the newer players haven't entirely bedded in yet. I do like Balde a lot, but he seems to sort of drift in and out of games. I mean, the interesting one to me is we're talking about Germain before, is Falcao, because the two of them played brilliantly together last year. I think both of them play better in a front two, and it's taken Germain a long time to get used to being the sort of lone man up front for Marseille. And yeah, recently Jardim's changed to one up front as well, and Falcao has, I'm not going to say completely lost form, but certainly doesn't look the same player he is with a strike partner. So I think that's one of the big things that they need to work on. I think he's such a good, clever player that he probably will adapt like Germain has, but it may well take time.
Yeah, it's felt he got off to a blistering start as well, but it's been more stop-start in the sort of last couple of months for him, hasn't it? It's not really clicked with Lemar, Keita Balde. Jovetic maybe hasn't really had a chance, but at the same time, I don't think Jardim thinks he can play a 4-4-2 with the midfielders he's got at the moment, even if he mixes in a Ndoram or something like that. But I did want to quickly mention, Peter, on Tielemans, was a big name signing. Is it maybe a little bit too harsh to expect so much of him? I know there's a big price tag and a big reputation coming from the Belgian league, and a lot of clubs were monitoring him. But are we maybe expecting a little bit too much too soon, even though we're in January now and he's still not, or late January now, and he's still not quite established in this team?
I've been a little bit surprised. I mean, we expected a lot from him when he joined from Anderlecht, and from his reputation and what he's done in Belgium. He hasn't yet established himself in the way you'd think he would. I think it's a lot to do with how they're setting up and how Jardim is using him. And it is part of that process that Jez was outlining, of trying to find the right system that suits the players he's got. And it does feel like this season is definitely one of transition for Monaco again, as he seeks to put the pieces of the puzzle together. With Tielemans in particular, I feel like he's been used too deep. From what I've read about him, I mean, I can't claim to have watched him at Anderlecht and his form there. What you hear and what you see about him was a player that was in the final third of the field for most of his games. He was the kind of player who would move from the centre of the park forward, and alongside Fabinho in midfield in a 2, or with João Moutinho in a 3, it just seems a little bit imbalanced. Of course, Fabinho can do the defensive work, but he also has a tendency to move forward. And I think one of the overriding issues, I think, with Monaco this season has been trying to replace Bakayoko. And obviously Bakayoko has struggled in England. But his role in the 4-4-2 last season was very well defined. It was very simple and very straightforward, and there wasn't the burden of creativity on him. He allowed others to play. And I think with what Monaco have got in the middle of the park, they've got João Moutinho, who's getting on a bit and doesn't have the legs to cover ground in the way that you'd need someone to do that in front of the back four. You've got Fabinho, who can do the defensive roles, but hasn't shone in the way he did last season, for me anyway. I think we saw a glimpse of what he can do. I mean, he scored a great goal yesterday, but I wouldn't call that his forte. And Tielemans, I feel, when he plays slightly more defensive, I feel like that's restricting him a little bit, and I think he's perhaps adapting to it. I don't think it's not a case of, he can't do that, but I think he's probably be more effective in the final third, but I don't think there's a position for him behind a striker, or in the way that we probably want to see him. So I think there is that aspect to it, and there is adaptation, and I think there's definitely more to come from him. And it is surprising it's taken him so long, but again, it's all about this transition and what Jardim's trying to build again.
Yeah, it's trying to figure out the right set of pieces, isn't it? It almost feels like a Rubik's Cube at the moment, and Tielemans is one of those pieces that it feels like he should be getting more out of, but he's not quite figured it out. I agree with your initial statement there that he's probably a little bit better further forward. His best game for me was that Leipzig game in the first, in Germany, where he did play further forward. He seemed more involved and obviously got himself on the score sheet as well. It does seem maybe that's where his future might lie, but we should wait and see, really. it was a successful start, at least for someone else this weekend, as Gus Poyet began his reign at Bordeaux by beating Lyon 3-1. It's a bit of a surprise result still, even though you would think those clubs are slightly closer than they are this season. Jez, how did they manage to pull off that kind of result?
I think there's probably a mixture of a few factors. I mean, Lyon are always able to throw in an awful performance out of nowhere. I think they're coming off the back of 7 straight away wins, but they are a young team and they do have some mistake-prone players, so it's not always a huge shock when they throw a match away. I think there's an element of a sort of new manager bounce. Most teams, except Metz, maybe usually see an upturn in form when as soon as a manager comes in, and certainly Poyet, I think, is the type that at least for his first month or so would be able to kind of really G up his players. Bordeaux have been improving the last couple of weeks anyway, so it's not their good performance didn't come completely out of nowhere. And then I'm certainly not putting it down just to that, because Bordeaux were the better team and deserved it, but it does help when you go 2-0 up thanks to the most disgraceful dive.
I think that's exactly where we should really start, to be fair. I mean, they were already 1-0 up in fairness, and it was a good finish from Nicolas de Préville. He looks a little bit solid.
It was a great break as well, actually.
Yeah, and it came from the attack. Both 2 goals out of 2, but it seems like maybe it was Jocelyn Gourvenec that was holding him back a little bit, but he does look better on the left-hand side. But then that moment, really, that is the moment of the game, really. It's a little theatrical is maybe the way to put it, Peter. It's in all honesty an abysmal dive, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I can't really find a way of praising it. I mean, it is very theatrical. The only thing I will say, and we'll give him, I don't think it's credit, but he's played the dive well. I mean, technically, he's done it exactly in the way that would fool the referee. I mean, he's got the timing right, he's got the right angle, he knows where the referee's looking at him, he's got the positioning so that he knows his legs will move in the right direction. So I mean, it looked theatrical, but I think you could see why he's given it. So I mean, if you want to praise him that way, then the technique for the dive was good, but that makes it absolutely appalling, as Jez was saying. And yeah, he's sold the referee, and you are disappointed that the referee has fallen for it in a way. I mean, there's no retrospective action, so there's not like we're going to see any combat in France, and maybe that's something they should look into. It would, if I think it was I think Metz against Nice. I think Straffi went down very, very softly. I would almost call that a dive from my perspective, even if there was slight contact. But you can't get rid of this sort of thing from the game without some kind of punishment. And I think with Malcolm, it's not like it was nowhere near. He has flopped theatrically, not in the traditional sense. If you haven't seen it, it's worth watching. He's flopped backwards onto himself. But yeah, it was game changing, as Jez was saying. And when the second goal was crucial. And then obviously there's a mistake from Lopez for the second penalty as well. So I think Lyon, it was a tight game, but those 2 things were the difference. I think the Lopez error, and then obviously the flop to Malcolm. But I think one of the things, just before I pass it on, was the Préville looks a lot brighter on that left-hand side. And I think it's partly to do with having the pressure put off him a little bit. I think up front on his own, it started to get to him that, he wasn't finding the net, and Gourvenec wasn't willing to reshuffle that. And with Laborde back in the side, it's freed him up a little bit to move a bit more creatively, find the spaces, and he's scoring goals again. So it's 3-2 now, isn't it? So, that's definitely a positive for Bordeaux. But back to the dive, yeah, terrible flop.
Yeah,
I thought Olas's comments were quite interesting on it, because obviously, well, he was on I think he was on L'Equipe's channel this week, and got a lot of social media attention for saying that he never criticizes referees. And sort of yesterday after the match, he kind of backed it up by not exactly criticizing the referee, but criticizing the fact that the referee was chosen to referee the match. because he was the ref when Mariano won a penalty for Lyon with a disgraceful dive recently against Toulouse. So he was suggesting that referee shouldn't have been picked because he might have been looking to even it up.
That's yeah. that's almost classic Orlas is maybe the nice
Yeah,
way.
exactly.
I'd give him a 10 really, Malcolm, for that dive. He really sold that one. I do feel a little bit sorry for the ref. It is very, very theatrical, but and especially in slow motion, we obviously have the advantage of replays. The referee only has one chance, and in that scenario where it looks like he stopped and it looks like the player's gone past him and stuck a leg out, not obviously hasn't caught him. But in those scenarios where players are going so fast, I do feel sorry for the referee that he's missed that one. That's the kind of thing that you might argue VAR would be fantastic for, where that's such a clear and obvious dive, and you would know that from the first viewing that it would really help the referees out on those kind of sticky ones. Where if he doesn't give it and it is a penalty, it feels like a stupid decision. If you get what I mean, it feels like that should be an obvious penalty if he does connect with him. Obviously, the referee can't quite see it, but I do have some sympathy with him for that. But there was one terrific performance I wanted to talk about, actually, really, and I saw Rich mention this and a few other people, and that's Maite in the middle of the midfield for Bordeaux, because we talked last week about how good Lyon's midfield, were against Paris Saint-Germain in Ndombele and Toussaint, and they brought Toussaint off at halftime because they needed more attacking incense, and Maite just got better and better. He was an excellent shield. He distributed it well. He added some steel to so in front of two brand new defenders, essentially, one returning back in loan in Pablo and the young 19-year-old that they started as well for his one of his first Ligue 1 games as well, which is he was relatively impressive as well. But especially Maite, he really added something that we mentioned when he was brought on loan from Monaco, that they needed someone to be a shield, someone to add balance to the likes of Varda and Larage and Sankara, because they all are a little bit too not defensive enough, really, and it left gaps in front of a really slow defense. But they all of a sudden just look a little bit quicker, look a little bit stronger, and that really contributed to a Lyon side that Jez, after a really great result, just felt a little lethargic. There wasn't quite the verve or the je ne sais quoi, you might say, that we saw against the champions, well, the league leaders, a week ago.
Yeah, I don't know why that is. Was Ndombele playing? I don't think he was. He was. Yeah, I mean, Morel had a poor game. The players that you expect to sort of run the show, like Fekir, were relatively quiet. I guess it happens to most teams every now and again, but it's kind of disappointing. Maybe it's just Bordeaux have somehow got Lyon's number, because they got that 3-3 draw earlier in the season as well. But yeah, it's sort of, I mean, it was a bit like, it's a bit harsh to compare Bordeaux to that, but it was a bit like Liverpool the other day, sort of beating Man City and then losing Swansea a week later. Like Lyon sort of did the really hard work last week. I guess, it has been quite an intensive week for them, sort of PSG at the weekend, Monaco midweek. So they are two tough matches, but on recent form, both Bordeaux's, well, I said they're improving, but generally their form hasn't been great, obviously, and Lyon 7 away wins, coming off those 2 wins against 2 of the top 3 teams. You'd have expected it to be a bit of a closer run thing, and frankly, Bordeaux were pretty comfortable. The second half was a little bit of a non-event because that they held Lyon at bay quite comfortably, and as you said, Maite was excellent. And strange because at Monaco, a lot of the players who came in the summer have at least been given fleeting chances. Maite barely was given any chance at all. I think it was decided quite early on that he wasn't up to it. But yeah, he really looked the part on Sunday. And I mean, Monaco, there's like Benacer as well. Monaco have got a couple of decent defensive midfielders on loan elsewhere now that they could possibly do with having in their ranks.
Yeah, I agree. I really like Benanes here. I think he's had a really good season for Cole as well. We did briefly touch on it last week, Peter, that maybe with Lyon obviously closing a gap to PSG, that maybe a title challenge might be on in if we got a little bit lucky. That probably has been laid to rest now.
Yeah, I think pretty much so. I think as Sam was mentioning it last week, if it was to happen, you've got to have Lyon winning consistently week in, week out. And as we've said, and as Jez outlined, they do have this in them, that this ability to switch off, which I think is part and parcel of having a young side. Genesio also doesn't strike me as a strong-willed manager as well. So after coming off games against Monaco, off against PSG, Monaco, suddenly it gets to your head. People are talking about them. Definitely the second best team in France. They're the only team that can challenge PSG. It does get to your head, and unless that's drilled out of you, and obviously there's the emotional fatigue of it you have to consider, then you can slip up. And against a Bordeaux side that look to have found new wings since Gourvenec has gone. Obviously, the new manager Bouts, and I agree that Poyet is the kind of manager who can galvanize a team. Then, you have the recipe for a defeat there. And and I think any hope that we had of a title race is gone. But it does mean that the top, the second to fourth battle remains on the Champions League spots. Looks very, very good indeed. So we can always look forward to next weekend as well with Lyon Monaco again.
Yeah, they keep coming thick and fast, and I'm so glad about that. These thigh rubbers in Liga, and it's keeping everyone on the edge of their seat, really. And it's a shame that we only have maybe a couple left to enjoy, really, this season. But they have been terrific, really. But yeah, that title challenge, I was maybe backing it a little bit too much last week. There might be something, maybe if a run of results went together, maybe PSG concentrated on too many cooks, sort of too many pots going at the same time. But it does look like it's over really now. On to the point where I am absolutely certain Jez has been itching to talk about, really, and it's 4 wins in their last 7 and 3 straight at home. Roux scoring goals after goals, 9 his joint with his league best, and it's 5 and 5 as well at the moment for him. Metz are fighting back. They really are, Jez. What's happened?
I think probably, again, a few different little factors, but probably the bottom line is Frederick Hans has happened. He's got previous building very sort of strong, solid team unit. Not always pretty, because generally where he's been, he hasn't had resources to make it pretty, but he's always built teams that have been difficult to beat. And I think, the start of Mess's season was so awful that, it really, what morale was just rock bottom. A lot of Mess fans talk about the match against Amiens, where they were probably the better team. Then Amiens scored, and Metz heads completely went down, and Amiens just controlled the rest of the game, scored another one for good measure, and that was probably as low as it was getting for Metz. There was just no belief, no confidence, nothing. And he's rebuilt that. He's brought in players like Palmieri, who are not the type that are going to sort of lay down arms easily. Couple of canny signings. He's managed to find some great form from Nolan Roux, and Emmanuel Riviere as well as sort of contributed quite a bit as well. And it might be that they were sort of so cut adrift that now they're playing with freedom because they've got absolutely nothing to lose. But I think it's probably a bit more than that. I think Hans has just given them a bit of belief, a bit of I don't want to say backbone, but sort of fight back ability, and a few players sort of clicking at the same time. Arguably, it wasn't entirely clear who the number one was, who the starting goalkeeper was, and possibly Didion's injury kind of came at the right time to sort of save anyone having to make that difficult decision, as it was made for them. And Kawashima has performed really well for Metz as well. So I think it's a few factors all sort of coming together at the same time that definitely Hans is the sort of glue that's made it all happen.
And that's the thing we said when he came in, really. It felt like he was the right man for the job at the time, and that he'd done quite well at Montpellier and was just probably unlucky to have lost his job there, really, towards the end of last season. And it felt like if he could get a couple of things right, that they could start changing things around, and they have, and they some great results, really. I mean, 3-0 against Saint-Étienne was terrific. The result of the weekend was great, even though obviously Nice spent a lot of that time a man down and had some really excellent chances that were missed. But you can only beat what's put in front of you, Peter. And in one man, but in particular, the worry we had is that they didn't have a goal scorer, and that both the players they had aren't goal scorers until now. Nolan Roux in the form of his life, really.
Yeah, it's a bit weird, isn't it? But he's found goals all of a sudden. He's not renowned for having a strong season by season record, but it's what Metz needed. I mean, last season they had Cheikh Diabate chipping in with the goals when he came in on loan, and Ismail Assar as well. And it felt like they didn't have it. It felt like we couldn't see where they were coming from. But playing off Rivière, Roux has found a new lease of life. And yeah, he's scoring good goals as well. I mean, he's been involved in 6 of the last 10, so this is a whole new focus on him. And I think it's been helped by the return of like George Manjek behind him. Just been given those opportunities, for the creativity that René Kochad's been able to produce from a deeper position.
I think this Milicevic has made a big difference as well, because I think he's sort of similar to Koad, maybe a little bit more offensive-minded, but Koad was just trying to take on so much by himself. And now having someone else there, and as you said, Manjek as well, who was really actually unpopular during his first stint, but so far so good with him. Now there's sort of 3 kind of central midfielders who are able to share the responsibilities between them, rather than Koad trying to do everything by himself. And Mess's winner the other night was one of the better goals that I've seen Mess score for years, of Milicevic sort of spreading it wide, great cross by Mole, and then great finish by Roux.
What really interested me about Metz as well is reading really the injury list that they had a couple of weeks ago as well. They looked like before the sort of Monaco game they had a fair few players out, but they're slowly coming back as well. They've brought quite nicely. Thinking of Palmieri's added an instant impact. You mentioned Manjek there and Milicevic as well, both adding to it. There's rumours that they're looking at Lamine Sane as well from Werder Bremen, who we do remember from his spell at Bordeaux. That would be an interesting signing to bring into the fold, an experienced player. And one player that was injured in Mole coming back at the weekend and setting up one of the goals as well. He's really took to the fire when he has been involved as well, and that's really great to see. They just have a spirit about them at the moment. They were a little bit. It was a tough game against Monaco, really, and you did worry after that one that with Kawashima being sent off and them really not really putting up much against Monaco. They had their brief moments and obviously did grab the goal in the end, but they've not really lost a stride. I mean, this is a team that had not won one game until sort of the very end, just before the winter break, and then they have gone an absolute tear. The only real issue, Jez, is that they're not catching anyone at the moment now. They were doing briefly, but everyone else keeps winning above them. So it just has to keep going. That must be Holtz's mantra at the moment, is keep going.
Yeah, I mean that's the concern, that they were sort of unlucky that just as they're hitting this form, they had Monaco, Nice, and Marseille 3 straight matches. And Monaco, even though it was 3-1, and Monaco were very good for their win, it was a much better performance from Metz. Down to 10 men quite harshly, they still sort of put up a good fight, and it took a couple of very good goals in the end to beat them. And then Nice, I wasn't really expecting much from that either, but they managed to get a win. Next week, I'd be surprised if we got a point. But this week was really frustrating because, as you said, everyone else won. But if they're winning, it means other teams aren't. And I suppose you have to say it sounds crazy because they're so far back, but it is in Messi's hands in that if they keep getting the results that they can get, even if there's the odd defeat against, I don't know, Lyon, PSG, Marseille, over the rest of the season, they do still have to play most of their rivals. If they can get wins in all those matches, then they can get out of it. And it's all so bunched. You see Bordeaux win a couple of matches and suddenly they're in the top 10 when, they were in crisis and in danger of relegation a couple of weeks ago. I'm not saying Metz are going to shoot up the league, but the fact that it's close means that there's not everyone's going to be able to escape from the sort of the lower half and from trouble. So if they keep beating each other, but Metz keep consistently winning theirs, then they've got a chance. I still wouldn't put any money on it, but this year exactly, and the fact that there's the playoff now that is sort of I suppose they could say we're aiming for third bottom. It's not ideal, but considering where we're coming from, that wouldn't be too bad. We're still giving ourselves another chance, and if we come into that in good form, then at least that's something. So sort of one stage at a time, but it's frustrating everyone else won, but then if Metz hadn't, they'd be even further adrift. So they just have to worry about themselves, I think.
That's the interesting thing, really, you mentioned, Jez. I mean, they might be aiming for that playoff at the moment, but at the same time, if you get themselves in that fight at the moment, I mean, you start looking again, Toulouse on 23, Troyes on 24, Lyon on 25, so are Angers, so are Amiens, Saint-Etienne are on 26, Caen of Strasbourg on 27. Again, there's a couple of teams still in the late 20s as well, slightly up in that. So as soon as you're in that mix, as soon as they get level with those, that they just maybe then they can sort of jostle for the positions like everyone else is. That's where they need to get to, isn't it? And I mean, you did mention obviously they got Marseille at the weekend on Friday, that if they can nick a point, that would be a good one. And then you look at the games after that, especially the next 4 games. I mean, Montpellier at home, Troyes away, Guingamp, who have slipped off the sort of, they won 5 in a row and then just slipped off again in the last couple of weeks. Got them away, and Toulouse obviously straight above them at home. It's just a ideal run of games. I mean, Montpellier aren't always the greatest away from home. Troyes have been in and out of form and are quite comfortably out of form at the moment. Really, it's a great chance for them if they can just keep that momentum going against Marseille. Get some players rested, possibly for that cup game against Caen. Don't worry too much about that one, and start getting keep that ball rolling. I'm absolutely certain that's what Hans will be doing at the moment. He'll be irate of sort of going, let's keep going. We're bringing more players in. We're trying to do a little bit more. Final question for you, Peter, because Jez has briefly kind of nudged around it. Can they do it?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think 6 points is not unassailable. I think. Is it 8? Is it 8 to safety? Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a couple of clubs in crisis, and suddenly Metz are back in it. And we've seen different clubs at different stages of this season go through really tough spells. Obviously, Lille have had to change manager, Saint-Etienne have changed manager, Bordeaux have changed manager, Toulouse have changed manager now. So it only takes a couple of clubs to hit the wall, and and then suddenly they find themselves caught up with Metz, and if Metz keep ticking over, then of course they can stay up. Yeah, at least they've given themselves the chance with this run of form. Because otherwise, it reaches a point where if you're so far cut adrift, then you write the season off. But because they've done it at this stage and they haven't left it too late, there's every hope.
I just hope that come the end of next weekend, we're not sort of 9 points adrift, because I think that would be pretty demoralising. Sort of come, to have been on this great run and then felt like it hasn't made that much difference. But if 6-7 points after these 3 games, then I think that they'll come out of that feeling quite good. And not that we're looking too far ahead, but most Metz fans have already seen that we've got a relatively doable last month or so, whereas teams like Amiens the last 3 matches of the season are PSG and Marseille and Metz in between. Oh, and Monaco before that. So if Amiens are down there around that time, then they could be struggling. But
Yeah,
that's looking a little bit far ahead.
it's that Dumb and Dumber moment, isn't it? So you're saying there's a chance, is what we're mentally saying at the moment. That's the main thing, really. There is a chance, and that's what we like. There's a few little teams that I'm thinking Cologne as well in Germany that are slowly starting to rise again. I love these moments where teams that look like they were dead and buried are starting to maybe fight back. We mentioned relatively early on that we thought Mets might be goners, but they're slowly creeping back into it. But on to transfer news, with obviously deadline day fast approaching. The slams shut on Wednesday. In fact, just about exactly 2 days, according to a Sky Sports counter, but it might be slightly different, obviously, with our French rules. Let's talk about one move that looks like it's going through at the Premier League, and it's been reported by Sky themselves as well, and that's Lucas, 25 million to Tottenham. Supposedly he's on a plane to London now for his medical. Peter, we discussed this briefly in a couple of weeks ago as well, the potential move to Spurs. It looked like he was shown around the training ground last week during a visit to England. Is this the right move for him? That's what I'm thinking. It's obviously a great move for Paris Saint-Germain to get him off the books and get the money. Tottenham adding another player to their mix. But is this the right move for him?
Well, he's linking up with Serge Aurier, which will help his how he settles. But I think the question was whether he would go permanently. And obviously PSG want the money, which is why they've been so forceful in doing that. And I think maybe Spurs would have preferred a loan to see how he would have done. But for him, I don't see him being first choice at Tottenham. He'll give them something different, which is a bit of pace, which they do lack. Someone who can get in behind and can also run at people. Is it a good move for him? I think the most promising aspect of the transfer, from his perspective, will be working with Pochettino. And I think, even though he hasn't featured that much this season, I think last season he was excellent. His return was really, really good. I think working with a manager like Pochettino will help him to settle. First of all, I think that Lamela was one when he first joined, very much out of depth in the Premier League in time, and he started to perform exceptionally well before he got injured and had that extensive period on the sidelines. But I think Lucas will definitely look at Pochettino as a manager who can help bring the best out of him, make him a consistent performer, and someone who can, take that next step up. And I feel like when he moved to PSG, there was so much talk about him, so much chatter, and it's not that he's underperformed it in Paris by any means, but he hasn't set the world alight in the way that I think a lot of people thought he might. I don't think that will happen at Tottenham, but I think with Pochettino, he'll be able to add traits to his game that will make him consistent. And the 25 million euros for him is not bad in the current market either, if they can get the best out of him. I think a lot of work will have to go into him to help him adapt and to progress. But I think under Pochettino, he's definitely the right man for him.
What do you think about this move, Jez? I mean, it does really add some nice depth to Tottenham. I mean, Lucas is probably desperate now to really get out of PSG and get some kind of game time, even if it's not regular first team football every single week in, week out. But it's a chance for him to maybe really rediscover what Paris Saint-Germain invested in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, by all accounts, he didn't want to leave PSG, but clearly they don't want him. Partly because they need the money, but partly he's just obviously not part of their plans now. And I do think there's still a very good player in there somewhere. As Pete said, that the fuss that was made and the sort of I think it was a battle between PSG and Man United, and it was really seen as a big coup when PSG got him. And his sort of, in a way, his whole career is summed up by that amazing run against Marseille, where he sort of took on the whole Marseille team, beat them, and then just last touch just carried the ball a bit too far, and Mandanda managed to smother the shot. That there's clearly so much talent there, and just often it was missing the end product. So I think he definitely needs a change. I think he's got the quality to join a top European club. But yeah, then it's up to him and up to Pochettino to get the best out of him, for him to sort of really get his head down. For example, I think at this stage he's in a way similar but better player than Sissoko. I mean, he's always played wide for PSG. I've never been convinced that's his best position. I think he'd be quite good as a sort of linking central midfielder. I don't want to say box to box, but I think he's the type that could link defense and attack. Maybe a sort of Lampard type that could time his runs perfectly to sort of come in from midfield and support the attack. I really think that he's a talent. I'm just not sure if he knows what exactly he is, where exactly he's going. So I think it's time to move, and time will tell whether it's the right move or not. But certainly under Pochettino, if he's given chances, he can thrive. I think Pochettino is an excellent manager who does seem to get the best out of people. So that's sort of high hopes for him in a way, not too much because I'm not a big Spurs fan, but
it does feel like the right manager though, doesn't it? And like having Pochettino there, it just feels like the right kind of person to put an arm around him and find his right position and really sort of repair the broken toy that maybe is Lucas really at the moment. It's hopefully it's a good move for him. But let's talk about players coming into Ligue 1 because that's what we love the most, obviously. And one kind of returning, because obviously he was mainly Ligue 2, and that's Diafra Sakho, who's joining Rennes from West Ham. It's been a tough few years, really, for the Frenchman, Peter. He struggled with injuries. He's only played, or started, at least 2 Premier League games in the last 2 seasons because of injuries, but he really hit the ground running there with 6 goals in 6 games, and he always seemed to perform well, at least anyway, when he was fully fit. That's the important thing now for Rennes, isn't it? It's a big outlay in 8 million for a Ligue 1 team, but it's getting him fit and getting him firing.
Yeah, it's definitely injuries that have held him back at West Ham. I always found it bizarre when David Gold put the foot down on his move to Rennes in the summer. I mean, obviously he was concerned about injuries in the West Ham squad, but it never really felt like he was going to get an opportunity to play this season, and that hasn't transpired. So I think Rennes will be pleased that they finally got him after the deadline day drama last time, where he was in Rennes and then he had a medical, but there was no agreement at all. It was all a bit of a farce. But anyway, he's there now, and there's a position there for him. I mean, Rennes have been using Khazri up top. Khazri's done okay, but I wouldn't call him an out-and-out striker. And I think having that focal point will be really useful for them. One interesting side note to that, though, is that the rumours linking Mubele on loan to Toulouse. I found that quite strange. I mean, whenever I've watched Rennes, Mubele's been one of their better performers for me. I mean, he's still relatively raw in his end product, and looks like he can produce magical moments, and then can screw the ball wide. But I think he's been one of their better performers, and to shove him on loan to Toulouse is, well, for me, it was a bit surprising. But I wonder if that's to do with the Sakho move. I'm not sure what you guys think.
Just what do you think? I mean, should they maybe be keeping hold of Mubele as like a backup, or do you think it's maybe best that he does move on and maybe start again at Toulouse and try and help them as well?
Well, I thought he started the season really well, and then possibly went off, but everyone seems to do that a little bit around. So the fans sort of went off him a little bit, but I still think there's a lot of potential there. So I guess they're thinking, if we're bringing another striker in, Mubele won't get many chances, so at least let's give him some first team action elsewhere. And if it is a loan, then hopefully we'll come back a better, more experienced player. But I am a little bit surprised, seeing as they are the type of team that chop and change a lot, that you'd have thought that they'd want to keep as many options open as possible. Especially because they've been playing, as Pete said, like playing Khazri up front is not really a striker. They've been playing Sarr up front when he's been fit, who's not really a central striker either. So they're by their actions, they're sort of telling everyone that they don't have many out-and-out strikers. So I'm a little surprised that they're getting rid of him. But I mean, albeit temporarily, but I'm quite excited to see Sakho come in. Obviously, I've got a bit of a soft spot for him from what he did for Metz in Ligue 2. And if it means that Sarr is going to move to the wing and have a target man to aim at, then if that partnership clicks, that could be pretty awesome for Rennes.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's almost like Liverpool and Southampton now, isn't it? Rennes buying all the old Mets players from them, at least. Anyway, let's mention two more really interesting ones, really, and it's young players mainly moving. And I'll give one of them to each of you, and I'll start with you, Peter, and that's Monaco's move, and it's a big move, really, around 25 million euros, really, and they beat out the likes of Juventus and other Italian teams to sign a Pietro Pellegrini from Genoa. He's made his Serie A debut at 15 last season, and he's only 16 years old. He's grabbed 3 goals in that time in about 7 or 8 games. But one for the future, certainly, for Monaco. We safely assume him maybe will really be maximum a backup, and obviously maybe in that Carrillo role for the rest of this season. But a man that a lot of Italians are very excited about, and someone that hopefully Monaco can turn into a superstar.
Yeah, he's at the right place for that kind of progression, and he talks well. I saw his comments about when he said he was leaving. He said it's the right time for him to go, and I just thought 16. But yeah, no, Monaco's obviously it's one of the best places to go for his development. He's clearly a player with a lot of potential, a lot of talent, but when they are so young, it's really important they're managed in the right way. I mean, players that I can think of who've had debuts as young as he has would be potentially Romelu Lukaku. And his development, he was very much aware of what he wanted to do, where he wanted to go. And you saw that with his career progression when he finally got to Chelsea and then moving to Everton and making those right decisions at the right time. So I think this could be a shrewd move for Monaco. I mean, they've invested a lot of money in him as well. But yeah, it'd be interesting to follow how he does.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen him a couple of times really briefly for Genoa, and it's mainly been highlights, but he does look like a strong young lad. He's very tall. He's like 6'5". He does mention that his idol and main influence is Zlatan Ibrahimovic, which will delight some, really. But it's...
I was worried you were going to say Lassina Traore.
Yeah. Hopefully not, at least for the young lad. I think he looks like a really interesting prospect as a forward. He's got a little bit of everything, really, and that's why they're so excited. And I think it's the right kind of move. I mean, Genoa are maybe struggling a little bit this season at times. They maybe have just sort of lifted themselves a little bit recently, but it's a tough environment, Serie A, I always think, for young players. That it's such well, especially not this season, at least. It's not really a defensive league anymore from this season, but it's tough to break in, really. A lot of Italian youngsters seem to wait until the sort of 2021 to really push through to senior teams, especially in those mid-table sides where so much is valued on staying in Serie A. They have a new TV rights deal as well, I know, next season that's very, very profitable for some of the smaller clubs. So they want to try and stay in Serie A, and it's understandable. He's probably played less games because of that. What a perfect team to go to, though. Monaco have over and over again over the last sort of 5 years brought young players and give them the time that they needed and not rush them. Think of Mbappe. I mean, I know he exploded, obviously, but he was given the time. He wasn't rushed in any kind of way. They waited until that moment where he did explode, which is hopefully what will happen with Pellegrini in the future, and maybe he can be the next one out of the Monaco sort of glamour players that they've had in the recent past. Final one, really, and he's kind of not moved in the end, and that's Martin Terrier, who's moved permanently, at least anyway, to Lyon. That'll be his parent club now. He will remain at Strasbourg for the rest of the season. They had to do some jiggling around a little bit, shall we say, to make sure that worked out correctly, that he could move and still stay at Strasbourg, because that was the real key in this move actually happening. And Jez, probably a good move for all parties involved, really. Lyon get an exciting young player that's done well at under-21s and for Strasbourg this season. Lille get the money they probably really desperately need at this kind of moment where they don't really have anything going for them in the transfer kit at the moment. And Strasbourg get to keep a striker for the rest of the season.
Yeah, as you said, I think it works out perfectly for everyone. It's kind of funny with Lyon. It's hard to sort of keep up with them at the moment because they've got Ndombele, who's on loan from Amiens, but they're going to sign him, but they're already talking about selling him. And then they've got Terrier, they bought him, but they don't have him yet because he's a loan on loan at a team that don't own him, and soon they're going to start selling players before they've even got them. And but just as Monaco are a good team to develop at, so are Lyon, and Terrier's already, arguably you could say that he's established already as a Ligue 1 striker. He's really done well for Strasbourg this year. He's shown pace, strength, skill. He's done it for the under 21s for a lot of this campaign, the sort of European Championship qualifying campaign under Sylvain Ripoll. I think there's been several occasions where it's Terrier that's sort of pulled France out of a bit of a dodgy situation in a few matches. So he's clearly got a good temperament as well, and you can imagine that if he stays fit and motivated, he'll do very well at Lyon. And you look at the young French players they've got, if they keep them all, Toussaint, Ndombele, Aouar, Fekir, I guess you could still count one amongst that. Terrier, that could be half of the French team of 3 or 4 years' time. Mendy behind as well. So it's certainly a good environment to be developing at. A little bit of pressure as well, but he looks like he can thrive under that. So I think it's a very good move for him. And as you said, Strasbourg will hope that he still sort of performs the rest of this year to ensure that they stay in Ligue 1. And Lille, I was going to say it's like Thauvin. It's not quite like Thauvin. He did play a little bit for them last year, but they're sort of getting rid of a player before he's when he's barely played for them. But as you said, they need the money, so it works out well for them. Even though I'm sure Lille fans would be sad to see him go.
Yeah, at least it's not quite like Thauvin in the sense that he kind of forced that move upon Leo more than anything, I think, in the end at least. But great move for him. It's an excellent club to go to, isn't it? And to stay at Strasbourg for the rest of the season and manage to get around that and make that work is really commendable by at least the French authorities to allow that to happen, really, because it's important for his development to keep playing football at the moment and helping Strasbourg for the rest of the season as well. I'm sure he'll be happy about that. Just enough time for our Ligue 1 snapshots then, and I'll start with you, Peter, because I know there's one big moment to mention, but also maybe some interesting developments at the league leaders at the moment.
Yeah, a bit of PSG. Edison Cavani's broken a record, top scorer one, 157 goals, which we mentioned at the start, and everyone seems to know. But yeah, he's finally done it, and Neymar's allowed him to do it, so that's good. But the interesting side of what I wanted to mention about PSG was the young players leaving. So this week, Claudio Gomez is set to leave for Manchester City, another really promising player. Abdurrahman Bari has been linked with Chelsea and Wolfsburg. Zagadou obviously went to Dortmund last summer. So it seems to be a growing trend of PSG's young talent that's leaving, and they appointed Luis Fernandez to oversee as head of youth development to try and stop this, to try and stop these players jumping ship. But it doesn't seem like it's working, and I think it's a damning indictment of the way they are, the way they're functioning. Symptomatic, I guess, of such large investments that, in terms of homegrown talent, they're not creating what you would call a sustainable model. And I think that contrast with Manchester City is quite stark. You've got City investing in youth players, and you can actually see now with City's investment in the Etihad and the Etihad structures around it, in terms of young players coming through, that there is actually progression. You look at like Phil Foden coming through and players like that, and PSG haven't built themselves in that way, and it seems like they are losing some top talents. But that's just one to watch for sure, to see if this continual drain of talent carries on.
Yeah, I'm really torn about that, because I completely agree with everything Pete said, but I eavesdropped on quite an interesting conversation on Twitter between I think it was a PSG fan and a non-PSG fan about it, and the PSG fan was arguing that PSG have as many players in their first team that are sort of broken through their youth ranks as any others of the very top teams, and they think that they're being very harshly cheated. I haven't really made my mind up about that yet.
don't know which one I'll side on that one. I want to talk about really an interesting one because I managed to catch Friday's game between Dijon and Rennes, and one man that was maybe forgotten about by a fair number of people in the glory that was Lois Dione for some reason, for some last season at least anyway, and he's headed to Bristol City now, and hopefully he does well there. But Julio Tavares was absolutely terrific at the weekend, and he's a really old-fashioned sort of target man, and he just adds a great depth to Dijon. I mean, they've got some really interesting players. Like Balmont had a great game as a sort of a central attacking midfielder at the weekend, and Samaritano as well, and Sleety and Kwon came on as well. Them are all running around him, just gives him extra ammunition. He scored plenty of goals this season. Again, it's 8 goals so far, which is another terrific tally from him. And he's just a really good footballer from my perspective. The amount of times the man chests the ball he must be red raw after a game, because he just plucks things out of the air with his chest with the majestic of sort of a Juan Mata, maybe when he's bringing a ball out the sky with his foot. It's an odd art to some, but I really think he's a great Ligue 1 footballer, and maybe was overshadowed last season, but certainly not this season. He's been terrific, and he brings so much to that Dijon side. He allows them to play long when they need to get out of play. He's good with his feet. He scores good goals. Really excellent player, and well worth watching if you get the chance to, because Dijon are a really good side, especially at home. It's 3 wins in a row for them at home now, and they keep looking like they're dipping back into the mire of it, and then keep pulling themselves away. They can't quite decide where they want to stay this season, but he will certainly be the X factor that will probably keep them out of the mire in the end when all is said and done. Jez, to finish off, what's your League on snapshot?
Mine's sort of more an observation, and we've actually mentioned a lot of the names tonight, but I just found it interesting this window, and possibly the summer as well, just how many players are coming back to France. So I mean, it started, I guess, with Payet, and we're talking about maybe Sané coming back to France with Metz, Sakho going to Rennes. You could even mention Poyet, who's started his career at Grenoble. I'm sure you two can think of lots of others like Arnott at the moment. I mean, I'm not sure if it says anything. I mean, they'll come back with various sort of degrees of success and failure. You've got Ntep and coming back from back to Saint-Etienne after arguably, and Villa's sort of sabotaged a lot of his career, and Ntep maybe has been a bit unlucky with injuries in Germany. But there's a lot of players coming back, and I just think it's quite an interesting sort of, not subplot, but an interesting thing that's going on amidst what is, I think, if at times the quality hasn't been as good as previous years, a really competitive league. And I thought it was interesting. I read in L'Equipe today that the supposedly greatest, most exciting league in the world, the Premier League, has had 22 0-0 draws this year, and then it gradually goes down to, I think, Liga and Bundesliga have had the fewest with 11 each. So, there's still a hell of a lot going for Liga, whatever some people say, and clearly for players as well as spectators, it's a good place to come back to.
Absolutely. It's good to see so many players come back, and we'll take the small victories wherever we can find them, at least anyway at the moment. And that's all we have time for this week. My thanks to Jeremy, Peter, and all of you listening at home. Join us for the preview show on Thursday, and the main show will be back at the same time, same place next week. A bientôt, and goodbye.